Hi, this is Douglas from Dynamic Computing, and I'd like to welcome you to episode 8 of the 10-minute Amiga Retrocast. This one is all about Amiga OS 3.1.4. Now, it's been a long time since Amiga OS has had an official update from the actual license holders. There was a period of time where Hague and Partner back in the early 2000s owned the rights to it, and they came out with OS 3.5 and OS 3.9. Got a 3.5 right here, and I also own 2 legal copies of OS 3.9. Really liked the software, really liked where they were going with it. They were trying to make a more modern version of the operating system. It came out with great things like the reaction interface for it. They had great features built into it, like the ability to support drives over 4 gigabytes, just built right in. But it was slow. Booting was slow. It used a lot of memory. Now, when OS 3.1.4 was announced, I was fairly excited for it, and I wanted to give it a shot, see how it was. I decided to keep 3.9 on my Amiga 1200 and put my system, my Amiga 4000 system, at OS 3.1.4. Had some issues with it. When I first tried it, I thought, well, let's use the update process that's supposed to take Amiga OS 3.9 and upgrade it to OS 3.1.4, but keep all the 3.9 goodies like the reaction interface and things like that. That didn't work. It hated my hard drives when I did that. It installed okay, but it just lost my hard drives except my initial 4 gig partition. No big deal, plenty of backups. So I thought, let's do a wipe and we'll just reload 3.1.4 from scratch. Okay, what could be easier? So I did that, and I ran into nothing but problems. I could boot from the install disk, and then I couldn't format my hard drives. I would try, I could partition them just fine. It would see my 74 gig and my 300 gig hard drive beautifully. And it would partition them. When I go to format, it gave me a seek failure. So got online. This time it was, I think it was English, no, it was amiga.org, I think, where I got in touch with Thomas Richter, one of the guys who's working on it. And he said I have to check the direct SCSI box in HD Toolbox. And I'm going to show you that here in a minute. And lo and behold, it formatted my drives just fine. Once I had selected direct SCSI for everything. No problem, must be something with the Workbench that it requires it, not a problem. So then the next issue, I would get the new Amiga OS loaded, and I would then reboot, and nothing would happen. Black screen, nothing. So well, it failed. So I reboot, try again, nothing. Boot to floppy, I could see my drives. Boot to the hard drives, nothing. So I thought, I'll just leave it sit there. 10 minutes later, up comes Workbench. Seriously, you can't wait 10 minutes for an Amiga to boot. That's just insane. And then once it booted, it seemed to be okay. But I couldn't have that. So I took out my 300 gig hard drive, and that helped. It would still boot, and it would still recognize my hard drives, but I had to manually reboot. I would boot a single time, and it would come up and it would say load module failed because it's verifying your hard drives. I'd do info at the command prompt, nothing. It's not verifying any hard drives, but it's also not seeing 2 of my hard drives. My work, which was a 60 gig partition, and then I have this thing called a scratch drive that I dump things to. It was a 4 gig partition. wasn't seeing them when I was booting. What's going on here? So I got back online, and again, I could reboot, and all my drives would show up, and Amiga OS would work absolutely perfectly. No problems, reboot 100 times is fine, but from a cold start, it would fail every time, and I'd have to reboot. Well, I can't have that. So I started just dinking around a little bit. I thought, well, I'm going to have to reformat everything. So I copied everything from my hard drives over to my 16 gig CF card, and I noticed it works perfect from there. If I boot to the CF card, boom, comes right up, work drive's great, everything's great on the CF card. So I knew then it was a problem, a compatibility issue with my Workbench. So I started thinking about how I had things set up, and looking at the hard drive partitions in HD Toolbox, and I was using long file name support. I thought, why not? It's a new OS 3.1.4 feature, let's use it. So I thought, well, let's take that check mark off, fully thinking I'd have to reformat my hard drive. So I took it off my work partition, rebooted, or did a cold start again, and it failed again. So what the heck's going on? So I did info at the command prompt again, CLI. I did info again, and it showed this time that my work drive was completely good, and it could see my work drive, but it said that my scratch drive was invalid. I'd only removed long file name support from the scratch drive, or from the work drive. So rebooted again, got back into Amiga OS, took off long file name support off of every drive, just like that. Reboots perfect, does all of its updates, everything's fine. So, in a nutshell, with some hard drive SCSI controllers, there are still a few little quirks and issues. I'm sure the team's going to work them out, everything's going to be fine, but there are some quirks and issues with it. Direct SCSI, I had to enable that. Long file name support, I had to disable that. That's the only way I could use the full capacity of my SCSI drives. Now, you may be asking, Doug, the CF card worked fine, why didn't you just use that? Well, even though the CF cards are solid state sort of drives, the IDE interface on the A4000 is 20% of the speed of the SCSI interface on my A4000, just miles away. So I really want to use my SCSI drives. So let's take a little closer look at Amiga OS 3.1.4. On the surface, everything looks very similar. We still have our normal Workbench and work icons and everything, that's all fine. But look at this, copyright 2018 Hyperion Entertainment. That is just great that we can boot up our Amigas and they have a copyright date of this year on a 68K Amiga. It's so fun. Now, it sees almost all of my memory. Now, I very specifically have a lot of buffers added on there, and I'm booting my Kickstart ROM into RAM. I'll go over that in a minute. So, but it's seeing most of my memory without any issues. Now, Workbench itself, they've apparently cleaned everything up and redid a lot of the files in the C folder. Almost all of the utilities have been touched up, tweaked, printer drivers have been fixed. They've really done a nice job of cleaning everything up and making it feel and run faster. They've built in support for high capacity drives. So now we can look at our drives and see the actual partitions, the actual sizes of them, which is kind of nice. Here's my 74 gig Seagate drive right here. See, I've got a 3.5 gigabyte Workbench, a 4 gig Scratch, and about a 62 gig work partition. Sees them just beautifully, no issues at all. Now here is where I had the issue. Under Advanced Options of Hard Disk Toolbox, I had to check Direct SCSI Transfer. That is not checked by default, as far as I know. It's not checked by default. And then I had to go into Change and remove long name support. I had to take that out. Now, another thing that I did that I don't know is necessary, in the documentation for 3.1.4, they say that fiddling with max transfer is not necessary. Mine was 0x FFFFFF. I changed it back to what the normal defaults are for max transfer. It didn't seem to help, but I did it anyways. Now, when you first download Amiga OS 3.1.4, and right now it's just a download, you can't buy a physical copy with a ROM, it's going to come in a nice little package like so. It's going to come in a nice little package, OS 3.1.4, and then it's going to have it for your specific Amiga. And the reason for that is each Amiga needs a different ROM. This actually updates the ROM too. So your Amiga 4000 ROM is different than your A1200. Your A1200 is different than your A600. The only ones that are the same are basically the 500 and the 2000. They use the same ROM chip. So the package comes with these ADF files for these individual disks. Now, so you can use the ADF files on WinUAE just fine, but when you want to use them on your real Amiga, what you have to do is you boot up in your old Amiga operating system, and you have to convert these into good old-fashioned floppy disks. Hopefully you still have a couple of those available. Now, there's a lot of tools available, probably 4 or 5 decent ones, that can convert ADF files into actual Amiga disks. The one that I like, because it's so darn simple, is called DevCopy. And DevCopy, it's a free download from AmiNet, of course. So you just go to AmiNet and load up and look for DevCopy. And I'll show you how that do. Open up the shell. We'll go to our work folder. Let's go to patches. Go to OS 3.1.4 underscore A4000. Good. Now, here we've got all of our disks, extras, install, locale, storage, etc. What we want to do is dev copy, and then the name of the disk we want to create. Workbench 3_1_4.adf. And it's going to assume you're using DF0, but if you're using one of an external drive, at the end of this you just put a 1 or a 2 or a 3, whatever drive you're using, and it goes ahead and it makes an actual disk for you. Now, there are graphics-based programs that do this, and they work just great, and whichever one you choose is just fine. So there, now that is created, my first disk, Amiga Workbench 3.1.4, and you see that's just a traditional Workbench disk. I can even boot to that, and it works just fine, booting from floppy. Now, the other thing that I think is terribly useful is this program here, Best Workbench, and I'll have the download link. I'll put it right down there at the bottom, and you'll also be able to find that in the description. Now, Best Workbench, what it does is it works along with OS 3.1.4 and adds in some missing features that they weren't able to put in, and it's completely free. For example, we actually have a find option now once we have Better Workbench on here, and we can search for programs. Let's look for Disk Doctor. And there, see, it's found Disk Doctor on there. So it's really nice and handy having a find feature. Now I've always used one in OS 3.9 that's had its own built-in, so I love it. A couple of other things that the Best Workbench does is it's got a nice text editor, which I really missed. I loved using Edit Pad on OS 3.9. There, nice fast text editor. So that's going to come in handy. And let me show you a little bit more of the features. Here we've got the Best Workbench README. So let's take a look here. Okay, so a couple things they can do. The find tool, like I said, new data types, system snooper, snoop DOS, new libraries for CPU support, a really nice file manager for copying, moving, and deleting files, new commodities, new printer drivers. It also comes with LHA by default, the latest version of LHA, CD audio player. There is a utility to read and write ADF files. So if you want to use a graphics utility for that, that's great. New Workbench startup prefs, new monitor drivers, backup tool, calculator, antivirus, text viewer, and new icon library, which is kind of nice. So really, get yourself Best Workbench. I'll also put the link for that down in the description. But get yourself Best Workbench. That is a great add-on for Amiga OS 3.1.4. Now, a couple of things that may be a little bit confusing at the beginning are the fact that you have to manually install these glow icons. Normally it just gives you these traditional icons here, but a lot of the pictures of 3.1.4 show these nice glow icons. Those have to be transferred over manually, and where those are, they're on the storage disk. So let's put storage in the drive. What we do is we go to a shell, go to DF0, which is generally where you're going to put your floppy, and now when we look here, we see we have this folder called glow icons. Now, while you're in DF0, we type this in, copy glow icons /# which is our wildcard, to sys : clone all. And what that's going to do is that's going to copy all of these info files, the glow icons icon files, over to your Workbench drive, which is kind of cool. And that's as simple as it is for the glow icons. Now, the other thing that is so incredibly awesome with OS 3.1.4 is this new feature where you can drag windows off the screen, just like you can, say, with Windows or the Mac OS. Now, if you recall, in the past, you'd move a window and you'd hit these boundaries here and you're done. So if you're trying to resize things, look around at things, that's it. That's all you could do. Now, whee. They do not enable this feature by default. This has to be activated, and it's fairly straightforward to turn this on. Let me show you how to do it. Each installation of OS 3.1.4 comes with a modules floppy that's created. These are specific files for the specific machines. Put that in your floppy drive. We're going to go back to DF0. Now here, you see we've got our lives folder. And in our lives folder, we have a new version of Intuition library. Now apparently the reason they don't install this by default is because people who use the CyberGraphics retargetable graphics utility, this does not work. This fails with CyberGraphics. It only works with AGA and Picasso. Now, It does work with CyberGraphics cards. That's what I have in my Amiga 4000. It works great. It's just the retargetable graphics that it doesn't work with. So they disable it by default, and you're using Intuition version 4.0 something, or version 40 something. So what you have to do is you copy this, Intuition v45.library to lives. So that's going to make a copy of that new Intuition library. Now let's go to the lives folder. Now you'll have an old Intuition here. Let's see, Intuition library. That's going to be the old version by default, version 40. Okay, you've got the new version here. So you rename Intuition library to something like Intuition.old. Now you see I already did that. There's old 2 and old. So you rename your Intuition library to Intuition old, and then you rename Intuition v45.library to Intuition.library. So you're renaming the new Intuition library to the default name, Intuition library. That's great. Now we take a look at our startup sequence. This is where it calls it, load module ROM update. Yours may look a little bit different. It may have some things about if it's version 45, don't do this, don't do that. I just deleted all those and told it to do the ROM update, load module ROM update, okay? And that will load in the new Intuition library. Once that boots up normally, you will now have your ability to go off the screen with your little windows, which is just absolutely incredible. So much fun. So is upgrading to Amiga OS 3.1.4 worth it? Absolutely. $35 in the United States. You can order it right off of Hyperion's website. It's just a trifle tricky to get it set up properly if you have a lot of extra hard drives, or if you have a special hard drive controller or anything like that. Maybe a few hoops you have to jump through. But for a traditional A600, A1200, A4000 with a built-in IDE, it's a dream. It's just easy to install. I know these guys are going to be tweaking it, fixing it, updating it as time goes on. It's absolutely worth it. Once they ship the actual ROMs, I'm really hoping that they give us some kind of discount on ordering the ROMs for those people who ordered the ROMless packages. You know, a couple bucks off. If we supply our serial number, something like that, that'd be great. But once we have the actual physical ROMs we can plug in, it's going to reduce the boot time even more, because it won't have to do the reboots to install the patches to patch our OS 3.1 ROMs. This is a great deal. The guys doing it are working their tails off, getting it done perfectly. From what I understand, they're not getting paid for it. I think they should. I think it's fantastic that in 2018 we're getting new updates to our favorite Amiga OS. I just find it unbelievable, the amount of support and the amount of cohesion in the Amiga community right now. I really am very impressed with it. I'm going to do a little bit more with Amiga OS 3.1.4. I think I'll do an entire session on the best Workbench. I think it's going to be worth it to go over all the different tools, show you what the different tools can do. But for the time being, this is Doug from Dynamic Computing, signing out.